The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning. Margaret Chen opened her eyes in the darkness of her small bedroom. She did not need the alarm, really. Her body always woke up at this time. It had been doing this for 23 years. She got out of bed slowly. Her knees hurt a little. She was 52 years old now. Her body reminded her of this fact every morning. She walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Gray hair tied back in a simple bun, brown eyes that rarely met anyone else's eyes, a face that people forgot as soon as they looked away. Margaret put on her gray uniform. The same uniform she wore every day. Gray pants, gray shirt, her name tag that said Margaret Chen, custodial staff. She made herself a cup of instant coffee and drank it standing by the kitchen window. Outside, the city was still dark. Most people were still sleeping in their beds. At 5:15, Margaret left her apartment. She walked down 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. She walked 4 blocks to the bus stop. The same bus stop she had been using for 23 years. The street lights made everything look orange and strange. The bus arrived at 5:30. Margaret got on. She nodded at the bus driver. The same driver who had been driving this route for 10 years. He nodded back. They never spoke. Margaret sat in the same seat she always sat in. 3rd row from the back by the window. The bus drove through the empty streets. Margaret looked out the window but did not really see anything. Her mind was quiet. This was how she liked it. Quiet, simple, invisible. Riverside Community College appeared in the distance. The old brick buildings looked gray in the early morning light. Margaret got off the bus at 5:50. She walked through the main gate. The security guard waved at her. She waved back, no words, just a simple wave. Margaret went to the custodial office in the basement of Building C. She clocked in at exactly 6 o'clock. She took her cleaning cart from the storage room. The cart had everything she needed: mop, broom, dustpan, cleaning sprays, garbage bags, paper towels. The wheels on the cart squeaked a little. She pushed it down the hallway toward the classrooms. The college was quiet at this hour. No students running to class. No teachers talking loudly. No groups of young people laughing and eating lunch on the grass. Just silence and empty hallways. Margaret liked it this way. She could work without anyone bothering her. Without anyone looking at her. Without anyone expecting her to talk. She started with classroom 201. She unlocked the door with her master key. Inside, the room smelled like chalk dust and old books. Desks were scattered everywhere. Students never pushed their chairs back in. There were papers on the floor. Candy wrappers. Empty coffee cups. Margaret began to clean. She swept the floor carefully. She wiped down each desk. She emptied the trash can. She cleaned the whiteboard. Her movements were steady and practiced. She had cleaned this room 1,000 times before, maybe more than 1,000 times. She did not need to think about what to do. Her hands just knew. A piece of paper on one of the desks caught her eye. It was a test paper. The student had written at the top, "I studied so hard for this. Please let me pass." Margaret looked at the grade. It was a B+. She smiled a little, just a small smile that nobody saw. Margaret moved to the next classroom. Then the next one. Then the next one. Room after room. Floor after floor. By 8 o'clock, students started arriving. They walked past her in the hallways. Some looked at their phones. Some talked with friends. Some rushed to class with their backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. A few students said good morning as they passed. Margaret nodded. She did not say anything back. She never did. Most students did not notice her at all. She was just part of the building. Like the walls or the water fountains. Something that was always there but nobody really saw. At 10:30, Margaret took her lunch break. She went down to the boiler room in the basement. This was her special place. Nobody else came here during the day. It was warm and private. She sat on an old wooden chair next to the boiler. She took out her lunch from her bag. A sandwich she had made that morning. An apple, a bottle of water. She ate slowly. She liked the quiet. She liked being alone. This had been her life for so long that she could not remember any other way to live. After lunch, Margaret went back to work. She cleaned the bathrooms on the 2nd floor. She mopped the main hallway. She took out all the trash from the offices. Teachers sometimes said thank you when they saw her emptying their trash cans. Margaret nodded. She gave them a small smile. but she did not speak. At 2 o'clock, a young woman with red hair walked past Margaret in the hallway. The woman was carrying a big stack of books. She was not looking where she was going. She bumped right into Margaret's cleaning cart. Books fell everywhere. They scattered across the floor with loud bangs. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the young woman said. Her face turned red. She looked very embarrassed. Margaret bent down and started picking up the books. The young woman bent down too. They picked up the books together. Margaret handed the stack back to the woman. The woman looked at Margaret's face for a moment. Really looked at her, like she was trying to see something. "Thank you," the young woman said. "You're very kind," Margaret nodded. She wanted to say, "You're welcome," but the words would not come out. They never did. The young woman smiled and walked away. Margaret watched her go. For just a moment, Margaret felt something. A tiny feeling of sadness. A tiny wish to be someone different. Someone who could talk and laugh and be friends with people. But the feeling passed quickly. Margaret pushed her cart down the hallway. Back to work. Back to being invisible. At 3 o'clock, Margaret's workday ended. She returned her cleaning cart to the storage room. She clocked out. She walked back to the bus stop. The bus came. She rode home. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. She unlocked her door and went inside. Her apartment was small but clean. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with an old couch and a television that she rarely turned on. Everything was organized and simple. No pictures on the walls, no decorations, nothing that showed who Margaret really was or who she used to be. Margaret made herself dinner, rice and vegetables. She ate at the small table by the window. Outside, the sun was going down. The sky turned pink and orange. It was beautiful. Margaret looked at it while she ate, but her face showed no emotion. She had learned long ago how to feel nothing. After dinner, there was a knock on her door. Margaret knew who it was. It was always the same person at this time of day. She opened the door. An old woman with white hair and a kind face stood in the hallway. This was Mrs. Kowalski. She lived next door. She was 83 years old. "Good evening, dear," Mrs. Kowalski said. "Would you like to come for tea?" Margaret nodded. She followed Mrs. Kowalski into the apartment next door. Mrs. Kowalski's apartment was very different from Margaret's. It was full of life. Pictures covered the walls. Plants grew on every windowsill. Books were stacked everywhere. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and old paper. They sat at Mrs. Kowalski's kitchen table. The old woman poured tea into 2 cups. She put out a plate of cookies. She talked about her day. She talked about the weather. She talked about a show she watched on television. Margaret listened. She sipped her tea. She ate a cookie. "You're very quiet today," Mrs. Kowalski said. She said this sometimes. It was her gentle way of inviting Margaret to talk. "Yes," Margaret said. "Just 1 word." Her voice was soft and rough. She did not use it very much. Mrs. Kowalski did not push. She never did. She just smiled and kept talking about other things. This was why Margaret liked her. Mrs. Kowalski accepted her silence. She did not try to fix Margaret or change her. Margaret stayed for an hour. Then she said good night and went back to her own apartment. She took a shower. She put on her pajamas. She got into bed. She turned off the light. In the darkness, Margaret lay very still. Her mind was quiet. This was how every day went. The same routine, the same silence, the same invisible life. She had been living this way for 30 years. It felt safe. It felt right. It was the life she deserved. Margaret closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be exactly the same as today, and she wanted it that way. She needed it that way, because being invisible meant being safe, and being silent meant never having to explain the terrible thing that happened so long ago. The thing she could never forgive herself for. Monday morning started the same as every other morning. Margaret woke up at 4:30. She got dressed in her gray uniform. She drank her coffee by the window. She took the bus to Riverside Community College. She clocked in at exactly 6 o'clock. But something was different today. When Margaret pushed her cleaning cart into the main hallway, she saw people everywhere. Teachers and staff members were walking around quickly. They looked busy and worried. Some of them were carrying boxes. Others were hanging up colorful posters on the walls. Margaret saw one of the posters up close. It had big letters that said Annual Fundraiser Gala, this Saturday night. There was a picture of people in fancy clothes. The poster said, Talent Showcase and Dinner, Support Student Scholarships. Margaret had seen these posters before. Every year the college had this big event. Rich people came to watch students and teachers perform. They ate expensive food. They gave money to the college. Margaret usually worked during these events. She stayed in the background and cleaned up after people. She emptied trash cans and wiped up spills. Nobody noticed her then either. Margaret pushed her cart toward the classrooms, but a man stopped her in the hallway. He was tall and thin. He wore glasses and had messy brown hair. Margaret had seen him around the college before. He was new. He started working here about 3 months ago. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you Margaret?" Margaret nodded. She felt uncomfortable. She did not like when people talked to her. "Great, I'm David Preston. I run the music department. We need some help moving a piano. Could you let us into the storage room in Building D? We need to get it out today." Margaret nodded again. She took her keys from her belt. David Preston smiled at her. It was a nice smile, not fake or impatient, just nice. Margaret led him across the campus to Building D. This was the oldest building at the college. Nobody used it very much anymore. The classrooms were old and cold. Most of the rooms were locked and full of old furniture and boxes. She unlocked the storage room on the 3rd floor. The door was heavy and the hinges squeaked loudly. Inside, the room was dark and dusty. It smelled like old wood and forgotten things. David Preston turned on the light. One yellow bulb hung from the ceiling. It barely gave any light at all. In the corner of the room, under old chairs and dusty curtains, there was a piano. A grand piano. Even covered with dust and surrounded by junk, Margaret could see it was beautiful. It was black and shiny under the dirt. It was big and elegant. Margaret felt something in her chest. A sudden feeling, like someone had reached inside her and squeezed her heart. She could not breathe for a moment. She stared at the piano. She could not look away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" David said. He walked over to the piano. He lifted some of the old curtains off it. More dust flew into the air. "It's been here for years. Nobody even remembered it existed until last week. We're going to use it for the gala. The music building piano is broken, and we can't afford to fix it right now." Margaret did not say anything. She could not say anything. She just looked at the piano. Her hands felt strange. Her fingers moved a little, like they remembered something her brain had tried to forget. "Can you help us coordinate getting this moved to the auditorium?" David asked. "We need to get a moving company or something. Maybe you know who to call?" Margaret nodded. She wrote something on a small notepad she kept in her pocket. She wrote a phone number. She tore out the page and gave it to David. Her hand was shaking a little. "Perfect. Thank you so much, Margaret." David looked at the piano again. "I hope this thing still works. It would be amazing to hear it play." Margaret left the storage room quickly. She walked fast down the hallway. Her heart was beating hard. She felt strange, scared and excited and sad all at the same time. She had not felt this way in a very long time. The rest of the day, Margaret could not stop thinking about the piano. She cleaned the classrooms, but her mind was far away. She mopped the floors, but she was not really paying attention. At lunch, she sat in the boiler room and ate her sandwich. But she could not taste it. She just kept seeing the piano in her mind. That week, Margaret watched the piano being moved. She saw the moving company carefully take it out of the storage room. She watched them put it on a special cart with wheels. She followed them as they moved it across campus to the auditorium. She was supposed to be working, but she could not stay away. The piano was placed in the center of the stage in the auditorium. The moving men were very careful with it. They took off all the protective blankets. Under the dust, the piano was even more beautiful than Margaret had thought. It was old, but it had been made with great care and love. A piano tuner came the next day. Margaret found reasons to be in the auditorium while he worked. She dusted the seats. She swept the aisles. She was very slow. She wanted to hear the piano being tuned. Every note that came from the piano made her chest feel tight. Friday evening came. Margaret's workday was over, but she did not go home. She told herself she needed to check the auditorium one more time to make sure everything was clean for the big event tomorrow. This was not really true, but she told herself it was. The auditorium was empty and dark. Margaret turned on just a few lights, just enough to see. The piano sat on the stage like a sleeping giant. Margaret walked down the center aisle slowly. Her footsteps echoed in the big empty room. She climbed the stairs to the stage. Her heart was beating so fast. She stood next to the piano for a long time. She did not touch it. She was afraid. Afraid of what might happen if she did. Afraid of the feelings that might come out. Feelings she had locked away for 30 years. But her hand moved anyway. She did not tell it to. It just did. Her fingers touched the keys. Just one finger, just one key. The note rang out in the empty auditorium. Clear and pure and beautiful. The sound filled the whole room. It filled Margaret's whole body. Before she could stop herself, she sat down on the piano bench. Her hands moved to the keyboard. They remembered. After 30 years, they still remembered. She played a few notes, then a few more, then a whole section of a piece by Chopin, a piece she had learned when she was 20 years old. The music poured out of the piano. It poured out of her hands. It was like water that had been trapped behind a dam for too long. The notes were perfect. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, even after all these years, even after all the silence. But then fear grabbed her. What was she doing? She could not do this. She did not deserve to do this. She stopped playing suddenly. Her hands flew off the keys like the piano was on fire. She stood up so fast that the bench fell over backwards. It hit the floor with a loud bang. Margaret ran. She ran off the stage and up the aisle and out of the auditorium. She did not stop until she was outside in the cold night air. She was breathing hard. Her hands were shaking. She felt like she might cry. But she had not cried in 30 years. She would not let herself cry now. Margaret walked to the bus stop. She went home. She went to bed. But she could not sleep. She kept seeing the piano. She kept feeling the keys under her fingers. She kept hearing the music in her head. What Margaret did not know was that someone had heard her play. David Preston had been working late in his office. His office was next to the auditorium. The walls were thin. He heard every note. He stood very still in his office and listened. His mouth was open in surprise. He had never heard anyone play like that. Not in years. Maybe never. The technical skill was incredible. But it was more than that. The emotion in the music was so strong, so real, so full of pain and beauty at the same time. When the music stopped suddenly, David felt like something precious had been taken away. He went to the auditorium to see who was playing. But by the time he got there, the room was empty, just the piano on the stage, and a fallen piano bench. He looked around but saw no one. Whoever it was had run away. David picked up the piano bench. He looked at the piano keys. He touched them gently. Who had played those notes? It had to be someone who had trained for years. Someone with real talent. But who at this college could play like that? Then he saw something on the floor near the stage. A name tag. It must have fallen off when the person ran away. David picked it up. He read the name on it. Margaret Chen, custodial staff. David stood very still. The quiet cleaning woman? The one who never spoke? She could play piano like that? It seemed impossible. But the name tag did not lie. He put it in his pocket. He had many questions now, but he did not know if Margaret would ever answer them. The next morning was Saturday, the day of the gala. Margaret woke up feeling tired. She had barely slept. She got dressed and went to work even though it was her day off. The college needed extra cleaning staff for the big event. Margaret had volunteered to work. She needed the extra money. When she arrived at the college, everything was chaos. People were running everywhere, setting up tables, hanging decorations, testing lights and microphones. The gala would start at 7 o'clock that night. There was still so much to do. Margaret cleaned and organized all day. She stayed busy. She did not think about the piano. She did not let herself think about it. But it was hard. The piano was right there on the stage. Every time she walked past the auditorium, she could see it through the open doors. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something bad happened. The event coordinator was on her phone. She was talking very loudly. Margaret went home at 5 o'clock. The gala would start in 2 hours, but she was not needed until later. She would come back at 9 to clean up after the event was over. She took the bus home. She climbed the stairs to her apartment. She felt very tired, not just in her body, in her soul. She sat on her couch in the quiet apartment. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in many years, she let herself remember. Really remember, not just the small pieces she sometimes thought about, but everything, the whole story of who she used to be. Her name had not always been Margaret Chen. 30 years ago, her name was Ming Li. She was 22 years old. She was a piano student at the San Francisco Music Conservatory. Everyone said she had a gift, a real talent. Her teachers said she could be famous one day. She could play in concert halls all over the world. Ming Li had been playing piano since she was 4 years old. Her mother had saved money for 2 years to buy a used piano. It was old and some of the keys stuck, but it was beautiful to little Ming Li. She loved it more than anything. Her mother gave her lessons at first. Then when Ming Li got better, her mother found a real teacher, a Russian woman who was very strict but very good. Ming Li practiced every day, for hours and hours. She did not mind. She loved the piano. She loved how the music made her feel. Like she could fly, like she could say things without words, things that were too big and too beautiful to say any other way. Her family was not rich. Her mother worked at a restaurant. Her father had died when Ming Li was 3 years old. She barely remembered him. There was also Ming Li's younger brother. His name was Jun. He was 8 years younger than her. He was a happy boy, always smiling, always laughing. He loved to sit under the piano while Ming Li practiced. He said he could feel the music in his whole body when he sat there. Ming Li got a scholarship to the conservatory. Her mother cried with joy when they got the news. Finally, all the hard work was paying off. All the sacrifices were worth it. Ming Li moved into a small apartment near the school. Her mother and June stayed in their old apartment across the city. At the conservatory, Ming Li worked harder than anyone. She practiced 6 hours a day, sometimes 8, sometimes more. She won competitions. She performed at recitals. Teachers praised her. Other students were jealous of her. But Ming Li did not care about any of that. She just loved to play. When she was 22, something big happened. She was chosen to compete in the International Young Artist Piano Competition. This was a very important competition. Winners got to perform with famous orchestras. They got recording contracts. They got their careers launched into the sky. Ming Li's teacher said this was her big chance. She had to practice very hard. She had to be perfect. The competition was going to happen on November 15th. That date was burned into Margaret's memory forever. Even now, 30 years later, she remembered it like it was yesterday. Ming Li practiced day and night for months. She was going to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was a very difficult piece, very emotional and powerful. She practiced until her hands hurt, until her back hurt, until she dreamed about the music at night. The night before the competition, Ming Li stayed at the conservatory very late. She wanted to practice just one more time, just one more run through the whole piece. She stayed until almost midnight. The security guard had to tell her it was time to leave. The building was closing. Ming Li took the bus home. It was so late. The streets were empty. When she got to her apartment building, she saw something that would change her life forever. She saw fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, red and blue lights flashing everywhere, smoke rising into the night sky, people standing outside in their pajamas and coats. Everyone looked scared. Her building was on fire. Her apartment building. The place where her mother and brother lived. The building was full of smoke. Flames were coming out of some windows. Firefighters were spraying water. But Margaret could tell it was bad. Very bad. She ran toward the building. A police officer stopped her. "You can't go in there, miss. My mother. My brother." "They're inside," Ming Li screamed. She tried to run past the officer, but he held her back. She fought him. She screamed and cried, but he would not let her go. Other officers came. They asked her what apartment her family lived in. She told them. Apartment 304, third floor. The officers radioed to the firefighters. Ming Li watched the third floor. She saw her window. It was full of smoke. She could not see anything inside. Time moved very slowly, and very fast, both at the same time. Ming Li stood there shaking and crying. She prayed. She begged God to save her mother and brother. She promised she would give up music forever if they could just be okay. She promised anything and everything. Finally, firefighters came out of the building. They were carrying someone. Ming Li ran forward. It was her mother. They put her on a stretcher. Ming Li grabbed her mother's hand. "Mama, Mama!" she cried. But her mother did not open her eyes. Her face was covered with black soot. The ambulance people put an oxygen mask on her face. They put her in the ambulance and drove away fast with the sirens screaming. "Where is my brother?" Ming Li asked the firefighters. "Where is Jun?" "He's only 14. He was in the apartment too." The firefighters looked at each other. Their faces said everything. One of them shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "We found a boy, but he didn't make it." The smoke was too much. Ming Li's legs stopped working. She fell to the ground. She could not breathe. She could not think. This was not real. This could not be real. Jun was not dead. He could not be dead. He was just a boy. He was her baby brother. He sat under her piano and smiled while she played. He was not gone. He could not be gone, but he was gone. And her mother died 2 days later in the hospital. Her lungs had been damaged too badly by the smoke. She never woke up. She never got to say goodbye to Ming Li. She just stopped breathing while Ming Li held her hand. The fire had started because of bad electrical wiring. It was an accident. An old building with old wires. It could have happened any time. But it happened that night. The night Ming Li stayed late to practice. The night she was not home where she should have been. If she had been home, maybe she could have woken them up when the fire started. Maybe she could have gotten them out. Maybe they would still be alive. But she was not home. She was at the conservatory playing piano, playing the stupid piano while her family burned. Ming Li did not compete in the competition. She did not care about it anymore. She did not care about anything. She went to the funerals. She stood there in black clothes and did not cry. She could not cry. She felt nothing. Just empty and cold. After the funerals, Ming Li disappeared. She dropped out of the conservatory. She stopped talking to her friends. She stopped talking to her teachers. She stopped talking at all except when she absolutely had to. She did not want to talk. She did not deserve to talk. She did not deserve anything. She changed her name. Ming Li died with her family. She became Margaret Chen, a new person with no past, no talent, no future, just a simple woman who cleaned things, who lived quietly, who bothered no one. This was the life she deserved. This was her punishment. For 30 years, Margaret had not touched a piano. She walked past them sometimes, in stores, in schools, on the street when someone was moving. Every time she saw one, she felt the pain. But she never touched them. She did not deserve to make music. Music had taken her family away. Or maybe she had let music take her family away. It was the same thing. But now, sitting in her apartment, Margaret felt confused. When she touched the piano yesterday, something happened. For just a few minutes, she did not feel the guilt. She just felt the music. And it felt good. It felt right. It felt like coming home after being lost for a very long time. There was a knock on Margaret's door. She opened her eyes. She stood up slowly. She opened the door. Mrs. Kowalski stood in the hallway. The old woman looked at Margaret's face and saw something there. "What's wrong, dear?" Mrs. Kowalski asked. "You look upset." Margaret tried to shake her head, to smile, to pretend everything was fine. But something broke inside her. Maybe because of the piano yesterday. Maybe because she was tired of carrying this pain alone. Maybe because she just could not do it anymore. "Can we talk?" Margaret said. Her voice was shaking. "Really talk?" Mrs. Kowalski's eyes got wide. In all the years they had been neighbors, Margaret had never said more than a few words. Never a full conversation. Never anything personal. "Of course," Mrs. Kowalski said gently. "Come inside, dear." Margaret followed her into the apartment next door. They sat at the kitchen table. Mrs. Kowalski poured tea. She waited. She did not push. She just waited for Margaret to be ready. And then Margaret started talking, really talking. For the first time in 30 years. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Then they poured out like water from a broken dam. She told Mrs. Kowalski everything. About Ming Li, about the music, about the fire, about her mother and Jun, about the guilt that ate at her every single day, about the silence she had chosen as punishment, about the piano she touched yesterday and how it made her feel. Margaret cried while she talked. Real tears. Tears she had not let herself cry for 3 decades. Mrs. Kowalski held her hand. The old woman did not interrupt. She just listened and nodded and sometimes wiped her own tears away. When Margaret finally stopped talking, she felt empty. But it was a different kind of empty. Not the cold empty she had felt for 30 years. This was more like being clean. Like something heavy had been lifted off her. Mrs. Kowalski was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft but strong. I lost my husband and my son in a car accident, Mrs. Kowalski said, 25 years ago. A drunk driver hit them. They died instantly. I was home making dinner when it happened. I felt guilty for years. Why was I not in the car? Why did I stay home? Maybe if I had been there, we would have taken a different road. Maybe we would have left 5 minutes later or earlier. Maybe they would still be alive. Margaret looked at Mrs. Kowalski with surprise. She had never known this. The old woman had never talked about her past. But you know what I learned? Mrs. Kowalski continued. The guilt was lying to me. I did not cause the accident. The drunk driver did. And your fire was not caused by you practicing piano. It was caused by bad electrical wiring. You could have been home and you still might not have saved them. Or you might have died with them. We cannot know. We cannot change the past. But I should have been there, Margaret whispered. I should have been with them. Maybe, maybe not. But they are gone now. And you are still here. Your mother and brother loved you. Do you think they would want you to stop living? To stop being yourself? To throw away your gift? Margaret did not know how to answer that. She had never thought about it that way before. Margaret stayed at Mrs. Kowalski's apartment for another hour. They talked about life and death and guilt and forgiveness. When Margaret finally went back to her own apartment, something had changed. She could not explain exactly what it was, but she felt different. A little bit lighter, a little bit less frozen inside. She looked at the clock. It was 7:30. The gala had started. She needed to be at the college by 9 to help clean up. She had time to rest for a little while. She lay down on her bed, but she could not stop thinking about what Mrs. Kowalski had said. Would her mother and Jun want her to live like this? Would they want her to give up music forever? Jun used to sit under the piano and smile up at her. He loved the music she made. He was so proud of his big sister. What would he think if he could see her now? Would he understand why she stopped? Or would he be sad? Margaret's mother had worked so hard to give her music lessons. She had sacrificed so much. She was so proud when Ming Li got into the conservatory. She cried happy tears. She said, "You are going to be someone important, my daughter. You are going to make beautiful things in this world." But Margaret had not made anything beautiful in 30 years. She had just cleaned floors and emptied trash cans and stayed silent. Was that honoring her family? Or was that just hiding? Margaret got up from the bed. She got dressed to go back to the college. She put on her gray uniform. She looked at herself in the mirror. A 52-year-old woman who had given up on life, who had made herself invisible, who had locked away the best part of herself and thrown away the key. She walked to the bus stop. The night was cold. When she got to the college, she could hear music coming from the auditorium. The gala was happening. She went around to the back entrance. She did not want to disturb anyone. She went to the custodial office and got her supplies. Then she waited in the hallway outside the auditorium, waited for the event to be over so she could clean. Through the doors, she could hear students singing. A girl played violin. Someone did a comedy routine that made people laugh. The performances were okay. Not great, but not bad. Margaret had heard better at previous galas, but the audience clapped politely for everyone. At 8:45, the auditorium doors opened. People started leaving. The gala was ending early. Margaret heard someone say the closing act had been canceled because the famous performer was sick, so they just ended the show. People looked disappointed. They had paid a lot of money for tickets. They expected more. Margaret waited until most people had left. Then she went inside the auditorium to start cleaning. The stage was empty now, just the piano sitting there in the spotlight. Margaret looked at it. She felt that pull again, that strange feeling in her chest. She started cleaning the seats, picking up programs that people had dropped, finding empty cups and napkins. She worked her way down toward the stage. She told herself she was just doing her job, but really, she wanted to be close to the piano, just close to it. She did not need to touch it. Just being near it was enough. Margaret was sweeping the stage when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around. David Preston was walking down the aisle toward her. He was holding something in his hand. As he got closer, Margaret saw what it was. Her name tag. The one she had lost yesterday when she ran away from the piano. Margaret's heart started beating very fast. He knew he had heard her playing. He knew it was her. She felt scared and embarrassed. She wanted to run again, but her feet would not move. David climbed the stairs to the stage. He walked over to her. He held out the name tag. Margaret took it with shaking hands. She could not look at his face. She stared at the floor. "I heard you play yesterday," David said quietly. "I was in my office. I heard everything. It was beautiful, Margaret. The most beautiful piano playing I have heard in years. Maybe ever." Margaret shook her head. "No, it was not beautiful. It should not have happened. She should not have touched the piano. It was a mistake. I did some research," David continued. "There was a piano student at San Francisco Music Conservatory 30 years ago. Her name was Ming Lee. She was incredibly talented. She was going to compete in a big competition, but then there was a fire. Her family died, and Ming Lee disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to her. The music world lost track of her completely." David pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. He unfolded it. It was an old newspaper article. There was a picture of a young woman at a piano. She was beautiful and young and full of life. It was Ming Lee. It was Margaret. 30 years ago. "Is this you?" David asked gently. Margaret looked at the picture. She had not seen this picture in so long. She had thrown away everything from her old life. All the photographs, all the programs from recitals, all the awards and certificates. She had destroyed it all. But here was this picture. Proof that Ming Lee had existed once. Proof that Margaret had been someone else. Someone who mattered. Margaret nodded slowly. Yes, that was her. A long time ago. In a different life. "Why did you stop?" David asked. "Why did you give up music?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she explain? How could she make him understand? The guilt, the pain, the feeling that she did not deserve to make beautiful things when her family was dead because of her choices. David waited patiently. He did not push. He just stood there and waited. Finally, Margaret managed to whisper a few words. "My fault, they died." "My fault? The fire was your fault?" David asked. Margaret nodded, then shook her head. She was not explaining it right. "I was not home. I was practicing. If I had been home, could have saved them. But I was playing piano. Music took them away." David was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke very gently. "Margaret, you did not start that fire. You did not kill your family. It was a terrible accident. A tragedy, but it was not your fault." Margaret shook her head again. He did not understand. Nobody understood. She had been selfish. She had put music before family, and her family had paid the price. "I have a question for you," David said. "If your mother and brother could talk to you right now, what do you think they would say? Do you think they would want you to give up music forever? To punish yourself for 30 years? To make yourself invisible?" Margaret felt tears in her eyes. This was the same question Mrs. Kowalski had asked. Why did everyone keep asking this question? Because it hurt. Because she did not want to think about what the answer might be. "I think," David said softly, "they would want you to live. Really live. Not just exist. They would want you to use the gift you have. The gift your mother worked so hard to help you develop. The gift that made your brother smile when he sat under the piano." A tear ran down Margaret's cheek. Then another. She could not stop them. David reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out another piece of paper. He handed it to Margaret. She took it with trembling hands. She looked at it. It was the program for the gala. But someone had written on it, in pen, At the bottom of the list of performers, someone had added a name. Margaret Chen, piano solo. What? Margaret whispered. She looked up at David with confusion and fear. The closing act was cancelled, David explained. The gala ended early. People were disappointed. The fundraising goal was not met. We need something special to bring people back. Something remarkable. Something that will make them talk. And you, Margaret. You are that something. Margaret shook her head hard. No. No. She could not do this. She could not perform. Not in front of people. Not after so many years. She had not even practiced. She had only touched a piano once in 30 years. She could not do this. I know you're scared, David said. I know this is asking a lot. Maybe too much. But I also know what I heard yesterday. That was not someone who should stay silent. That was not someone who should hide. That was someone with a gift that the world needs to hear. Margaret was shaking her head over and over. She backed away from David. She wanted to run, to go home, to hide in her small apartment and never come out. I'm not going to force you, David said. This has to be your choice. But I want you to think about something. You have been punishing yourself for 30 years. 30 years of silence. 30 years of being invisible. Has it helped? Has it brought your family back? Has it made the pain go away? Margaret stopped backing away. She stood very still. Because he was right. The punishment had not helped anything. The pain was still there. Every single day. The guilt was still there. Nothing had changed except she had wasted 30 years of her own life. Maybe, David said, it's time to stop punishing yourself. Maybe it's time to honor your family in a different way. By living. By using your gift. By making the kind of beauty that made your brother smile and your mother proud. David put the program down on the piano bench. I'm going to send out a message tonight. To everyone who came to the gala. I'm going to tell them we have a special surprise performance tomorrow evening at 7. A private concert. Free admission. I think people will come. I think they will want to see what this is about. Tomorrow, Margaret gasped. Her voice was barely a whisper. Tomorrow, David confirmed. That gives you almost 24 hours. You can use this auditorium to practice. I will make sure nobody bothers you. The piano is tuned. It's waiting for you. The choice is yours, Margaret. You can walk away right now and nothing will change. You can keep living the life you have been living. Or you can take a chance. You can stop hiding. You can play again. Really play. Not for me. Not for the audience. For yourself. For your mother. For Jun. David turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he stopped and looked back. The auditorium will be open all night and all day tomorrow. The door will be unlocked. If you want to practice, just come. Nobody will stop you. Nobody will judge you. It's your choice. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Margaret stood alone on the stage with the piano. She looked at the program lying on the bench. Her name written there in pen. Margaret Chen, piano solo. She felt sick. Her whole body was shaking. This was crazy. She could not do this. She had not performed in 30 years. What if she forgot everything? What if her hands did not work anymore? What if people laughed at her? What if she embarrassed herself? What if she failed? But another voice in her head said something different. A small, quiet voice that sounded a little bit like her mother, a little bit like Jun. What if you succeed? What if you remember? What if your hands still know? What if the music is still inside you waiting? What if this is your chance to finally stop punishing yourself? What if this is your chance to live again? Margaret picked up the program. She stared at her name. She looked at the piano. The beautiful black piano that had called to her. That had made her feel something again. Something besides guilt and sadness. Margaret did not go home that night. She stayed in the auditorium. She sat in one of the seats in the back row and stared at the piano on the stage. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The building was completely silent. Just Margaret and the piano and the decision she had to make. At 3 a.m, she finally stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long. She walked down the aisle slowly. Her footsteps echoed in the empty room. She climbed the stairs to the stage. She sat down at the piano bench. She looked at the keys. Black and white. 88 of them. They looked the same as they had 30 years ago. Unchanged, waiting. Margaret lifted her hands. They were shaking. She placed them on the keys. She took a deep breath, and then she began to play. Not the Rachmaninoff piece she had been practicing for the competition. That piece was buried too deep, too connected to that terrible night. Instead, she played something simpler. A piece by Chopin she had learned when she was 16. A nocturne, slow and beautiful and sad. Her fingers stumbled at first. She hit wrong notes. She forgot sections. She had to stop and start over several times. But slowly, her hands remembered. The muscle memory was still there, buried under 30 years of silence. But still there, like a language she used to speak fluently that was coming back to her. She played for hours. The nocturne, then other pieces. Some she remembered completely. Some came back in pieces. Some were lost forever. But enough remained. Enough to work with. Enough to make music again. When the sun came up, Margaret was still playing. Her back hurt. Her fingers hurt. But she did not want to stop. It felt too good. Like finding a part of herself she thought was dead. Like breathing after holding her breath for 30 years. At 8 in the morning, she finally stopped. She was exhausted. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were dry and tired. She had not slept at all. But she felt more awake than she had felt in decades. She felt alive. Margaret left the auditorium. She walked across the campus to the bathroom. She washed her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was a mess. Her gray uniform was wrinkled. But her eyes looked different. Less empty, less dead. There was something there. Something like hope. Something like fear. Something like life. She went back to the auditorium. She practiced more. All day long she played. Sometimes she cried while she played. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she just felt numb. But she kept playing. Because now that she had started, she could not stop. The music was pouring out of her. 30 years of silence breaking open. 30 years of unplayed music finally being heard. At 5 o'clock, David Preston came to the auditorium. He had food and water. He set them on a seat near the stage. He did not say anything. He did not ask if she was going to perform. He just left the food and water and went away. Margaret ate quickly. She drank the water. Then she went back to the piano. At 6 o'clock, Margaret heard sounds outside the auditorium. Voices, footsteps. People were arriving. David had sent out his message. People were coming to see the mysterious performance. Margaret felt panic rise in her chest. This was real. This was really happening. She could still leave. She could run out the back door. Nobody would stop her. She could disappear again. Go back to her quiet, invisible life, but she did not run. She stayed on the stage. She kept practicing. She practiced right up until 6:55. Then she stopped. She stood up. She walked backstage into the small dressing room. She looked at herself in the mirror there. She still looked terrible. She had not changed clothes. She was still wearing her gray custodial uniform. Her name tag was pinned to her shirt. Margaret Chen, custodial staff. She thought about taking it off, about trying to look nice, but then she decided not to. This was who she was now. Not the young, talented Ming Li, not the girl with the bright future. Just Margaret, the cleaning woman, the simple woman, the invisible woman who was about to do something impossible. At 7 o'clock exactly, the auditorium lights dimmed. Margaret heard the audience get quiet. She stood in the wings of the stage. She could see the piano in the spotlight. She could see the edge of the audience. So many people. The auditorium was almost full. Maybe 200 people, maybe more, all here to see her. All here to judge her. All here to watch her fail or succeed. Margaret's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Her hands were ice cold. Her legs felt weak. She could not do this. She could not walk out there. She could not play in front of all those people. What had she been thinking? This was a mistake. A terrible mistake. David Preston appeared beside her. He looked at her face and saw the terror there. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I can go out there right now. I can tell them there was a misunderstanding. I can send everyone home. Nobody will blame you." Margaret looked at him. She opened her mouth to say yes. Yes, send them home. She could not do this. But different words came out. Words she had not planned to say. "If I walk away now, I will regret it forever. I will wonder for the rest of my life what might have happened. I am tired of regrets. I am tired of living in the past. I am tired of being invisible. David smiled. Then go walk out there. Tell them who you are. Tell them your story. And then play. Play like you played yesterday. Play like you played all night. Play for your mother. Play for Jun. Play for yourself. Margaret nodded. She took a deep breath. She walked out of the wings and onto the stage. The spotlight was bright. It blinded her for a moment. She could not see the audience very well, just shapes in the darkness, but she could feel them. 200 people staring at her, confused, curious, some probably annoyed. They had come expecting something special, and here was just the cleaning woman in her gray uniform. Margaret walked to the center of the stage. She stood there for a moment, silent. The audience waited. Some people whispered to each other. Is this a joke? Who is that? Is she lost? Margaret heard the whispers. She knew what they were thinking. Why would the cleaning woman be on stage? This must be some kind of mistake, but it was not a mistake. Margaret opened her mouth. She was going to speak. In front of all these people. After 30 years of choosing silence, she was going to use her voice. Really use it. Not just to say excuse me or thank you, but to tell her story. Her real story. My name is Margaret Chen, she began. Her voice was soft and shaky. People in the back probably could not hear her well, but she kept going. Some of you know me. I clean your classrooms. I empty your trash. I mop your floors. You see me every day, but you don't really see me, because I have been invisible for a very long time. I made myself invisible. On purpose, the audience was completely quiet now. Everyone was listening, leaning forward, trying to hear her soft voice. 30 years ago, my name was different. My name was Ming Li. I was a piano student. A good piano student. I was going to compete in an important competition. I was going to have a career in music. I was going to make my mother proud. But then there was a fire. My mother died. My younger brother died. And I blamed myself, because I was not home that night. I was practicing piano, and I thought, if I had been home, maybe I could have saved them. Maybe they would still be alive. Margaret's voice was getting stronger now, clearer. The words were flowing easier. She could see some people in the audience wiping their eyes. They were crying. For her loss. She had not expected that. So I stopped playing piano. I stopped talking. I stopped being Ming Li. I became Margaret. A simple woman who cleaned things. A woman who stayed quiet. A woman who made herself invisible. Because I thought that was what I deserved. I thought that was my punishment. For 30 years I have lived like this. But yesterday something happened. I touched a piano for the first time in 30 years. And I remembered something. I remembered that music was not my enemy. Music did not kill my family. Music was the thing my mother gave up so much to give me. Music was the thing that made my little brother smile. Music was my gift. And throwing it away, hiding it, that was not honoring them. That was wasting what they had worked so hard to help me build. Margaret paused. She took another breath. She looked out at the audience. She could see their faces now. Her eyes had adjusted to the light. They were all looking at her. Really looking at her. Seeing her? Maybe for the first time ever. Tonight I am going to play piano. For the first time in 30 years. I'm going to play for my mother, for my brother Jun, and for myself, because I am tired of being invisible. I am tired of being silent. I am tired of punishing myself. So this is my gift to you tonight. My story, my music, my truth. Margaret turned and walked to the piano. She sat down on the bench. She placed her hands on the keys. She closed her eyes, and she began to play. Not the Rachmaninoff she had been practicing 30 years ago. Not the Chopin nocturne she had played last night. But something different. Something she had written herself when she was 20 years old. A composition she had never performed for anyone. A piece she called Letter to Home. It was a piece about family. About love. About missing someone. About saying goodbye. The music started soft and gentle. Like a whisper. Like a memory. Then it grew. It became stronger, more emotional, more powerful. Margaret's fingers flew across the keys. She did not have to think about what to play. Her hands knew, her heart knew. The music poured out of her. All the grief she had held inside for 30 years. All the love she had for her mother and brother. all the regret, all the pain, but also something else, something like forgiveness, something like release, something like freedom. The audience sat frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Nobody whispered. They just listened. Some people had tears running down their faces. Some people had their eyes closed. Some people had their hands over their hearts. The music was not just notes and rhythms. It was emotion made into sound. It was a human soul speaking without words. Margaret played for 20 minutes. The piece was long. It told a whole story. Beginning, middle, end. From childhood innocence to terrible loss to slow acceptance. The final notes were soft and gentle again. Like the piece was coming full circle. Like it was finding peace. When the last note faded into silence, Margaret lifted her hands from the keys. She sat very still. Her eyes were still closed. She was not ready to open them yet. Not ready to face what came next. For several seconds there was only silence. Complete and total silence. Margaret sat at the piano with her hands in her lap. Her eyes still closed. She was afraid to open them. Afraid to see the audience's reaction. What if they hated it? What if they thought it was terrible? What if they were angry at her for wasting their time? Then someone started clapping. Just one person. Slow, steady claps that echoed in the quiet auditorium. Then another person joined in. Then another. Then suddenly everyone was clapping. But not just clapping. They were standing up. One by one, then in groups, then all together. The entire audience rose to their feet. The sound of applause filled the auditorium like thunder. People were not just clapping politely. They were clapping hard. Real applause. Honest applause. Some people were shouting bravo. Some were still crying. Margaret opened her eyes. She turned on the piano bench to face the audience. They were all standing. All of them. 200 people standing and clapping for her. For Margaret Chen, the invisible cleaning woman. The woman nobody had ever noticed before. They were seeing her now. Really seeing her. And they were telling her that what she had done mattered. That her music mattered. That she mattered. Margaret stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. She did not know what to do. Should she bow? Should she wave? Should she say something? She had never performed for an audience before. Not like this. The competition 30 years ago had never happened. She had never learned how to take a bow, how to accept applause, how to stand in front of people and let them see her. But she did it anyway. She bowed. Just a small bow. Her body bent forward slightly. When she straightened up, the applause got even louder. She saw people with tears streaming down their faces. She saw David Preston in the front row. He was clapping and smiling. His eyes were red. He had been crying too. Margaret looked around the auditorium. She tried to see everyone, to take in this moment, to remember it. Because this was the moment everything changed. This was the moment she stopped being invisible. This was the moment she stopped hiding from herself. This was the moment she finally forgave herself for being human, for making choices, for not being perfect, for surviving when others did not. The applause continued for several minutes. Margaret did not know what to do, so she just stood there. Finally, people started to sit down. The auditorium got quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, just peaceful. Like everyone was taking a breath after experiencing something powerful. David Preston stood up and walked onto the stage. He had a microphone in his hand. He spoke to the audience. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know this was a surprise. I know you did not know what to expect, but I hope you found it worthwhile. Margaret Chen has just shared something very precious with us. Her story, her music, her courage. I think we should thank her again. More applause. Margaret felt her face get hot. She was not used to this attention. She wanted to run away, but she stayed. She made herself stay and accept the praise. Because this was part of living again, part of being visible, part of being real. Before everyone leaves, David continued, I want to let you know that the fundraising goal for the scholarship fund has been met. Actually, it has been exceeded. Several people have already called me during the performance to pledge donations. They heard about tonight's concert and wanted to support it. So thank you, Margaret. You have done something wonderful for this college and for future students who will receive scholarships because of your courage tonight. Margaret felt tears in her eyes. She had helped raise money for students. Students who needed help. Students who wanted to learn. just like she had needed help when she was young, just like her mother had worked so hard to help her. Maybe this was another way to honor them, to help others the way she had been helped. People started leaving the auditorium, but many of them came up to the stage first. They wanted to talk to Margaret, to thank her, to tell her how much the performance meant to them. A young woman with dark hair came up first. She was crying. "Thank you," she said to Margaret. "My father died last year. I blamed myself because I was away at college when it happened. But hearing your story tonight, hearing you talk about forgiveness, it helped me. It really helped me. Thank you." Margaret did not know what to say. She reached out and squeezed the young woman's hand. No words, just a simple touch. But the young woman understood. She smiled through her tears and walked away. More people came. An older man who had lost his wife, a student who struggled with guilt about something, a teacher who had given up on her dreams years ago. Person after person, each one with their own story, each one touched by Margaret's music, each one seeing themselves in her journey. After everyone had left, Margaret sat down on the stage floor. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. She felt empty, but it was a good empty, like she had poured out all the poison she had been carrying, all the guilt and shame and sadness. It was gone now. Not completely. It would probably never be completely gone, but it was lighter, manageable, no longer crushing her. David Preston sat down beside her. He did not say anything at first. They just sat together in the empty auditorium. Finally, he spoke. "You did it. You really did it. How do you feel?" Margaret thought about the question. How did she feel? She felt scared. She felt relieved. She felt sad. She felt happy. She felt everything all at once. "Different," she finally said. "I feel different," David nodded. "Different is good. Different means change. And change means growth. What happens now?" Margaret asked. This was the question that scared her. She had done this impossible thing. She had performed. She had told her story. She had played piano in front of people. But what came next? Could she go back to being invisible, Margaret? Did she even want to? "That's up to you," David said. "You can go back to your life if you want. Keep cleaning. Keep being quiet. Nobody will judge you. But I hope you don't. I hope you keep playing. I hope you keep speaking. I hope you keep being visible." Margaret looked at the piano sitting in the spotlight. "I don't know if I can perform again." That was so hard. So scary. "You don't have to perform," David said. "Not if you don't want to. But maybe you could teach. We have students here who need piano lessons. We have a scholarship program for kids who can't afford lessons. They need teachers. Good teachers. Teachers who understand that music is more than just notes. It's healing. It's expression. It's life. Teaching." Margaret had never thought about teaching. But as soon as David said it, something clicked in her mind. Yes, teaching. That was something she could do. She could help other people learn what her mother had taught her. She could pass on the gift. She could keep the music alive in a new way. "I would like that," Margaret said quietly. "I would like to teach," David smiled. "Good. We'll work out the details. You can start small. 1 or 2 students. See how it goes. And you can keep your cleaning job too if you want. Or not, it's your choice. Everything is your choice now." Margaret went home that night on the bus. She looked out the window at the dark city passing by. She thought about her mother. She thought about Jun. She imagined them watching her from somewhere. Were they proud? Did they understand what she had done tonight? Did they forgive her for taking so long? In her mind, she heard Jun's voice. Her little brother who used to sit under the piano and smile. She heard him say, "That was beautiful, sister. I told you that you could do anything." And she heard her mother's voice, soft and gentle. "I am proud of you, my daughter. I have always been proud of you. Even when you could not be proud of yourself." Margaret closed her eyes. The tears came again. But they were different tears. Not tears of guilt or shame. These were tears of relief, of release, of beginning again. She cried quietly on the bus. The driver did not notice. The other passengers did not notice. But that was okay. She was not invisible anymore. Not really. She had shown herself tonight. Her real self, and people had seen her, and accepted her, and thanked her. When Margaret got to her apartment building, she saw a light on in Mrs. Kowalski's window. The old woman was waiting up. Margaret knocked on her door. Mrs. Kowalski opened it immediately. She looked at Margaret's face and saw everything written there. The exhaustion, the emotion, the change. "You did it," Mrs. Kowalski said. It was not a question. She knew. She could tell. "I did it," Margaret said, and then she smiled. A real smile. A big smile. The kind of smile she had not smiled in 30 years. "I played piano. In front of 200 people. I told them my story. And they clapped. They really clapped. And some of them cried. And some of them thanked me. And I felt alive. Really alive. For the first time since the fire." Mrs. Kowalski pulled Margaret into a hug. The old woman was small and frail, but her hug was strong. "I am so proud of you, dear. So very proud." They sat together and drank tea. Margaret told Mrs. Kowalski everything. Every detail. Every feeling. Every moment. She talked and talked, using her voice. Not afraid anymore. Not silent. Mrs. Kowalski listened and nodded and smiled. The days and weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. Margaret kept her cleaning job. She still wore her gray uniform. She still pushed her cart through the hallways. But something was different. Students and teachers recognized her now. They stopped to talk to her. They said hello. They asked how she was doing. They treated her like a person. Like someone who mattered. Margaret started teaching piano lessons. She had 3 students at first. Then 5, then 8. They were scholarship students. Kids who could not afford regular lessons. Kids who loved music but needed help. Margaret taught them in the evenings after her cleaning shift was done. She taught them technical skills. But more than that, she taught them that music was a language, a way to express feelings that were too big for words, a way to heal, a way to live. One of her students was a 12-year-old boy named Marcus. He reminded Margaret of Jun. He had the same smile, the same enthusiasm. He loved to play piano. He practiced every day. He told Margaret that he wanted to be a concert pianist someday. Margaret encouraged him. She told him to work hard, to never give up on his dreams, and she meant it. Margaret also started playing piano for herself again. Not performing, just playing. She would go to the auditorium late at night when nobody was there. She would sit at the piano and play for hours. Sometimes she played classical pieces. Sometimes she played her own compositions. Sometimes she just improvised. Let her fingers go where they wanted. Let the music flow out without thinking about it. 3 months after the performance, David Preston came to Margaret with an idea. "There's a retirement home across town. They asked if we could send a pianist to play for the residents once a month. I thought of you. Would you be interested?" Margaret thought about it. Playing for people again. Not a big audience. Just old people in a retirement home. People who might be lonely. Who might need music to brighten their days. People like Mrs. Kowalski. Yes, she could do that. So once a month, Margaret went to Sunrise Retirement Home. She played piano for the residents. She played songs they remembered from when they were young. Big band music. Old show tunes. Classical pieces. The residents loved it. They clapped and sang along. Some of them cried. Some of them told her stories about their youth. About when they used to dance. About people they had loved and lost. Margaret realized something. Her music had power. Not the power to make her famous. Not the power to make her rich. But the power to touch people. To help them remember. To help them feel. To help them connect with something beautiful. That was enough. That was more than enough. 1 year after her performance at the gala, Riverside Community College held another fundraiser. They asked Margaret if she would perform again. She said yes. This time she was not terrified. She was nervous. But it was a different kind of nervous. Excited nervous. She wore a nice dress this time. Not her gray uniform. And she played a different piece. Something hopeful. Something about new beginnings. The audience loved it. They gave her a standing ovation again. But Margaret did not need the applause as much this time. She had learned that the applause was nice. But it was not why she played. She played because she needed to. Because the music was part of her. Because staying silent would be like not breathing. Possible for a while. But eventually fatal. Margaret kept in touch with some of the people who had come to her first performance. The young woman who had lost her father, the teacher who had given up on her dreams. They wrote her letters. They told her how her story had changed them, how it had given them courage to face their own guilt and pain, how it had helped them forgive themselves and move forward. Margaret saved all the letters. She kept them in a box in her apartment. Sometimes, when she felt the old guilt trying to come back, she would read the letters. They reminded her that her suffering had not been meaningless, that her journey could help others, that sharing her truth had been the right choice. 2 years after the performance, Margaret did something she had not done in 32 years. She visited her mother and brother's graves. She had not been able to face them before. The guilt was too strong. But now she felt ready. She took flowers. She sat on the grass between the 2 headstones. And she talked to them. She told them everything. About the 30 years of silence. About the piano in the auditorium. About the performance. About teaching. About learning to live again. About learning to forgive herself. She cried. But they were healing tears. Cleansing tears. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long," Margaret said to the stones. "I was so afraid, so guilty. I thought you would be angry at me for not being there, for surviving when you didn't. But I don't think that anymore. I think you would want me to live, really live, not just exist. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm living. I'm playing piano again. I'm helping students. I'm using the gift that Mama worked so hard to help me develop. I'm honoring you both, every day, in every note I play, in every student I teach. You are not forgotten. You never will be." Margaret stood up. She kissed her fingers and touched each headstone. Then she walked away. She felt lighter, like she had finally set down a heavy burden she had been carrying for too long. Her mother and brother were at peace. And now finally so was she. Margaret Chen continued to work at Riverside Community College. She kept her cleaning job because she had learned that dignity was not about titles or recognition. It was about being true to yourself, about doing work that mattered no matter how simple, about being present and real and honest. But she was no longer invisible. She no longer chose silence. She spoke when she wanted to speak. She played piano when she wanted to play. She taught. She helped. She connected with people. She lived. Really lived. After 30 years of darkness, she had finally found her way back to the light. And it was not because someone rescued her. It was because she rescued herself. She made the choice. She took the risk. She opened her mouth and let her voice be heard. She opened her heart and let the music back in. And in doing so, Margaret Chen became more than just the simple woman who cleaned classrooms. She became a teacher, a musician, an inspiration, a reminder that it is never too late to begin again, never too late to forgive yourself, never too late to stop being invisible and start being seen, never too late to take back your voice and use it to tell your truth, never too late to live.